Hello, everyone, and welcome to Journey to Success Radio Network. My name is Brad Szollose, and Tom Cunningham asked me to sit in as your guest host today. Best wishes to Tom and his wife, Kim, as they take care of some personal issues today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am the award-winning author of Liquid Leadership, which delves deeply into today's generational divide. You know that tension between baby boomers, Gen X, and Gen Y that is happening inside corporations these days? Well, I specialize in helping companies create a 21st century business model that gets all generations working together. I've also been an entrepreneur for over 35 years, starting my first business at 16, and my fourth company, K2 Design, was an entrepreneurial startup that I grew into a global brand with over 60 employees, an evaluation of $26 million, and an IPO on NASDAQ. You can find out more about me at liquidleadership.com. And that leads me to today's guest, Brian Smith. I'm more than excited to chat with Brian. Brian, you on the line?
I sure am, Brad.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you, but you know who's more excited that I'm talking to you? My wife.
I bet it's your wife.
You got it. Norma, when I told her, she's like, oh, tell him this, tell him that. I was like, relax. Women go crazy over this product, which we're going to get into. But when she found out I was interviewing you, now she's impressed. Everything else I've done in life, she's not that impressed. This, she's impressed.
Cool.
Now, before I read off your amazing accomplishments, Brian, I want everyone who's listening to grab a pen and some paper because Brian will be sharing some of his wisdom on this podcast. And that is what makes our show, Journey to Success, different. We interview real entrepreneurs who have taken their entrepreneurial startup and turned it into a household brand. So without further ado, let me introduce Brian Smith. Graduating in 1978 as a chartered accountant in Australia, Brian came to California looking for the next big opportunity to bring back to Australia. While studying at the UCLA Graduate School of Management, he observed that there was no sheepskin footwear in the United States. With only $500 in capital, he imported boot samples and over the next 17 years built the Uggs Australia brand into a multi-million-dollar international enterprise. He sold it in 1995, and the brand has continued to grow to exceed $1 billion in annual sales for the past 3 years. Brian is one of the most sought-after international business leaders in the country today. He is committed to teaching entrepreneurs how to leverage their most precious assets from within and to recognize and pursue their passions to create a fulfilling and successful life. Brian has authored the book, The Birth of a Brand, Launching Your Entrepreneurial Passion and Soul, is a sought-after keynote speaker and mentors small business owners everywhere. Please welcome to our show today, Brian Smith.
Wow, thank you, Brad.
You're welcome. I look forward to this. This is exciting. Let's be honest. You were a surfer dude in California, am I right?
That's how it started out, yes. and luckily I'm still a surfer dude. I still surf, so that's great.
Excellent. So what I'm really trying to get into, and this is for our listeners really, and that is, here's Brian going to school for business. And yet he's surfing during the day or at night, enjoying the life that California offers, and all of a sudden you see something that's missing. And what is the story behind the story? That's really what I want to know, Brian, while you're out there in California.
Okay, well, I'm going to take you back to when I was a chartered accountant. I studied to try and pass the exams for 10 years. And I finally did. And the last day I worked as an accountant in Australia was the day I graduated. And I knew I was not set out for a life in accounting or public accounting. So I had this like epiphany one day. I was listening to a brand new record album that I just bought. It was Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd.
I had that one.
And the second song was, the words were, tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long and there is time to kill today. And I was thinking, oh my God, that's me. He's writing about me.
Right.
And then it went on and said, but then you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And I just erupted in goosebumps, and I went, oh, my God, and I thought of all my friends who were tracking onto partnerships in accounting and others who'd started their own businesses, and I'd been running on the spot for 10 years. And so I just, within a couple of days, I had booked my fare to California because all the new trends in Australia were coming from California, such as Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands and everything. And I was off to find my next big thing in life, in California. And it was probably, 3 months being in California, doing a lot of surfing up at Malibu. I was waiting for my buddy to come down and pick me up. We were going to go surfing, and he brought along the issue of Surfer magazine, and inside was a photograph of this. It was an advertisement with these two legs up in front of a fireplace wearing sheepskin boots, and I got goosebumps again. I went, oh, my God, there's no sheepskin boots in America. And it seemed like 1 in 2 people in Australia owned some sort of sheepskin footwear. So I talked to my buddy and just said, hey, we got to go into business, So that was the genesis of the idea.
That's fantastic. And anybody who's listening, it's almost like serendipitous, kismet, whatever. I had that same album, by the way, Dark Side of the Moon. And in the 70s, that was like an integral part of growing up in that era. Yeah. And you had to sit around for hours to listen to that. It wasn't the kind of music where it's just got this heavy beat. It's very cathartic and deep and all these things. And the goosebump part is what gets me, because I've been in those situations as well, where you look at a picture or you run into the right person and all of a sudden chills run up your spine and you realize this is a moment to take action.
Yep.
This is a moment to do something.
You know what I think it is? Because, if you can get from the title of my book, launching your entrepreneurial passion and soul, you can sort of get the impression that I'm quite spiritual, right?
Yes.
Well, I believe those goosebumps is your inner being saying, hey, take notice, you're on the right track.
Yes,
right?
I agree. I agree with you.
It's a very powerful message from inside.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you my little story. Probably around 1992, I was climbing mountains with a drinking buddy and a friend of mine. I had been at his wedding party, and we used to have these conversations about what is God, what is spirituality, what is all this stuff. And he just thought I was crazy talking about this stuff. And one night he tells me, he goes, you know what it is for me? It's standing on top of a mountain and it's silent.
Right.
And he goes, I guess that's the closest thing to spirituality I could say that connects with what you're talking about. And I thought that was interesting that he said that, because a year later he says to me, let's start a business together. Oh, no. And we're doing all the left brain stuff that everybody does. We have this logical business plan, and we had a list of names for the company, and they were all very yuppie, nerdy names like Douglas Bradley Associates, very cool names. And we're about to leave the house, and he's an avid skier, and we're mountain climbing hikers, and we're about to walk out the door, and we had probably written down 50 names, Brian.
Yeah.
And I looked up on the wall, and I had taken a picture of us at the top of the mountain, and he did this sort of victory pose when we were at the top of this one peak we had climbed that was only a mile high, but the weather was horrible. And I remember, we compared that to, well, what would it be like to climb Mount Everest or K2? Mm-hmm. And as he's leaving, I said, think about some of these names. We might want to call it K2. And he just looked at me, and I looked at him, and we got chills.
Yeah,
up and down our spine.
I totally get it. Yeah, I'm getting him now listening to your story.
Yeah, and the next day, that week, we literally went down to 60 Worth Street in New York City and registered as a partnership K2 Design. And from that moment on, we grew in 3 years to 60 employees and an IPO on NASDAQ. And anybody listening, this is, it doesn't have to be all left brain. Passion, spirituality, follow your heart. There are moments in this life where you can't force it. It's going to happen naturally.
Yep.
Now, my next question is, how did you decide to bring Ugg boots to America? I mean, the only place I saw sheepskin was when I grew up in Pennsylvania. You saw sheepskin liners for your car seats, or you saw them for coats that the farmers would wear in the wintertime, or the hunters, and they were considered the warmest thing ever. Tell us.
That's funny because I thought the minute I saw that and got the goosebumps, I thought, oh, instant millionaire, you know. But what I didn't realize is that Americans don't get sheepskin the way Australians do. Americans think it's hot, prickly, can't get it wet, sweaty, delicate, you know, and Australians know it's rugged. You can't rip it. You can wash it and get it wet, and you can put it on with wet feet, and it wicks the moisture out and gets them dry and wet, you know, warm in. And so there was this complete difference. But what I learned though is that for every entrepreneur, you have to have a certain amount of ignorance or innocence going into these new ventures, because if you knew all the obstacles going in, you'd never start. And 90% of these businesses wouldn't exist. And so that was a part of the ignorance that I launched on, not knowing this difference. I started out going to all the shoe stores and got completely shut out in California, maybe 300 stores. And then they were all saying, it's too hot in California. And I knew it wasn't, because the climate's identical to Australia. Anyway, I went to a show in New York City and got a tiny piece of the end of a table there near the toilets, because I was a last-minute exhibitor. And nobody recognized what the product was. I may as well have had meat or car parts or something on the table, because they didn't get it. And on the way on the plane back to California, I'm thinking, well, why do all my buddies, flip out over these? And I realized they were all surfers. And it struck me that every California surfer who went down to Australia on their surf trips would bring 3 or 4 pairs of boots back. And so within the surf market, it was really well known. So my friend and I just switched gears and we started going to surf shops. And the initial, we bought some samples, and the initial interest was, wow, those are fantastic. Yeah, if you bring those in, you're going to make a fortune. And so that really pumped us up, and we raised $20,000 in capital, which we thought was all we'd ever need. And we bought, 500 pairs in. And then we loaded up our cars and we went back to these same shops, and it was, oh, well, yeah, you're going to be really successful, but we couldn't sell them out of this store because, we just sell surfboards and surf shorts and thongs and sandals but don't worry, you're going to do great, And it turned out that after, going to every single surf shop in Southern California, our total sales for the first year was 28 pairs. Was exactly $1,000. But the lesson, I learned from that is that even though Ugg is $1 billion now, it could never have got there without that first 28 pairs. Right?
Yeah.
And so the being philosophical, I've sort of come up with this theme that you just can't give birth to adults, and that's the main theme in my book, which is that every business is conceived and then some action is taken. You've been through that with your businesses, and then it just lies there. And it seems to lie there forever, just like an infant in a cradle. And there's no amount of overfeeding or jiggling the cradle or urging it. It cannot get up and go to college.
Right.
It has to be an infant. And then eventually it'll hit the toddling stage, which is fun. You get customers start, getting interested in your product. And then it'll hit youth, which is great. Tons of orders, production's good, sales are good, accounting's good, shipping and billing is great. And that's a fabulous period for every business. But if it's a really hot item like Ugg was, it'll hit the teenage phase, and then, everything hits the fan then, because just like a teenager wants to be at every party there is, well, the Ugg boots wanted to be, for me, wanted to be in every store, and people are calling and clamoring for it. And that's a really dangerous phase. I almost lost the business a couple of times there. But then the managers come and put the controls in and it matures. So even though we only sold 28 pairs that first year, it taught me a valuable lesson over the years as the business grew, that everything has its own natural evolution.
Wow. Well, I'm hearing so many things in what you're saying, and I hope people are taking notes right now because I'm hearing a lot of things. The maturity of a brand, turning it from a product and baby steps, moving all the way up into a household brand.
Right.
This takes time. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And there's a maturity phase. It's just like raising a child. And really the other thing I'm hearing, this is the most powerful part of anybody who's listening. You had the audacity to think big. You may not have seen it that way at the time, but you were searching for your market at the time. And the market wasn't what you thought it was at first. The market started to develop as you went to these different places and realized, oh, there's where my customer is.
Yeah, there's a great follow-on story to this if you'd like to hear it.
Sure, I would love it.
Okay, so we sold 28 pairs, but we'd bought 500, right? And these are in my third bedroom, so we that would be a perfect time to go out of business and say it was a shitty idea. But I was stuck with all this inventory. So my friend and I just loaded up our vans every weekend and went to the swap meets. And when I would go surfing at Malibu, there was parking lot, and I would open up the back of the van after surfing, and I had a tremendous business clientele coming in just from word of mouth buying boots there. But that next year our sales were $30,000, and so we started advertising in Surfer Magazine and Action Sports Magazine, and we'd hire these really pretty models and put them on the beach on the rocks at Windansea Beach, and perfect hair and perfect makeup and perfect clothing and perfect Ugg boots on the rocks, and sales for the next year $30,000. So next year we hired more expensive models and more expensive photographers and did them up on the beach with the perfect hair and sales $30,000. And I was just feeling like a real loser because I couldn't get into the mall stores, and I was back in Chicago at the buying office of a company called Montgomery Ward, which was a big shoe retailer at the time in the malls. Mm-hmm. And I gave my best sales presentation, and he says, just was silent for a while. And then he goes, "Brian, why are you here?" And I went, "Because I want to get an order for your California stores." And he said, "Don't you get it? We're the elephants. We don't move till the mice are running around under our feet." And I instantly got what he meant was, I knew I had to get all the retail, the little independent stores in a frenzy before the malls were going to take notice. So I went back to California, and I was having a beer with one of my surf shop owners and explaining my situation. And he calls to the back of the shop, those little 13 and 14-year-old Grammys were back there. And he says, "What do you guys think of Uggs?" And they all came out saying, "Oh, those things are so fake, man. Have you seen their ads? Those models, they can't surf." Instantly, I realized for 3 years I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. And so within a couple of days, I called up a buddy of mine who ran an amateur surf team, and I said, "Are any of your kids going to go pro soon?" And he gave me the two guys, and so I started sponsoring them. And then instead of the expensive photographers, I just followed these guys with my own camera. We go, walking down to Black's Beach or Trestles, and these are classic surf walks. And I started running ads with these young pros. And that next season, like within 2 months of me running the ads, we hit $250,000 just purely because I figured out the image. So that goes back to your point that I was trying to find my market. Well, I found my market, but I was just alienating them with my images. So it was a really valuable lesson for me, and I eventually became a really good marketer by figuring out every ad I ran. I had to try and make the consumer want to be inside that photograph.
So you had the right product, the wrong message. You found the right target, wrong message. Anybody listening, take notes because and everybody thinks if I could just get into Walmart, if I could just get into Costco, if I could get my brand into major stores. No, it's a grassroots effort. If you can find the consumer or the person or the user of your product that just loves it and just start selling to them. I've seen more traction from people going up to a snowboarder and say, "Hey, here's our line of clothing. and all of a sudden the snowboarders are just wearing it on the slopes, and everybody's turning around going, "Where'd you get that?" It's word of mouth.
It's so true. It's completely organic. In my book, I think I write, you can take, 5 business plans, 10 lawyers, and a bunch of specialists, and put them in a room and launch a business overnight. But that's like trying to put 9 women in a room and have a baby in 1 month. It just doesn't work. Everything has to be organic. And there's a big business out there that didn't start with this infancy and toddling.
I want everybody to go out and get Brian's book, The Birth of a Brand. Go on Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, just get out there and buy it. The Birth of a Brand, and I love your tagline, launching your entrepreneurial passion and soul. And the cover of this book is so cool. I don't know if it's the sunrise or the sunset, but there's a pair of Uggs on the beach with the feet facing the ocean as it comes up. I think that wraps up everything that you are in a nice little bow of an entrepreneur and a spiritual person at the same time. I think it's just phenomenal.
Thanks a lot.
So go out there and get that book. Let's keep digging in, because I love these stories, and it really is. What do they call it? Kismet, serendipitous moments, synchronicity. You're having a beer with a buddy, and you yell into the back, "Hey, what do you think of Uggs?" And it's amazing. And you also, this is something that you discovered. There was a season for your product as well. Do you want to talk about how you survived through those lean times?
Yeah, well, there was the worst time was also the best time. This was a pretty good story too. We got up to about $2 million in sales, and we kept outgrowing our investors, so I'd have to buy the old ones out and bring in new ones with bigger money. And at this point, I brought in 3 new investors, and we were all going to own 25% each of the company. And I brought the business, and they brought the money. And part of the deal, I didn't get my 25% until I finished up this little trademark lawsuit, and I was a sales rep for Southern California. So the first day I was out on the road after we moved the warehouse to Anaheim, and I went down to Huntington Beach and walked into the surf shop there, and the guy says, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I heard you sold the business. I called an order in, and they said you don't own it anymore." I went, "Oh, my God, what are they telling people?" And I went next door to the Shell gas station and called up and said, "Neil, what are you telling people?" And he said, "Well, it's true, you don't own the business." My world crashed, because I've seen myself as a CEO of this big multinational company one day, and I'd worked 7 or 8 years to this point to get it to where it was, and I went back to San Diego. I just quit work that day and went back to San Diego. I pulled out the contract and read it. And I went, "Oh, my God, I don't get my stock until I do this trademark." And I just decided, for 3 days I was in depression. I was going, well, what do I do? Shall I become a business broker, a real estate agent? And eventually I figured, well, I've come to like sales. And so what can I sell that could be really good? And again, in meditation, I just got this goosebumps, and it was sell Ugg boots, And so I, ate humble pie, and I decided to go back and just be a sales rep and not be an owner anymore. And so I went out on the road, and I was having a good time out there, with all my surf retailers, because we'd now become pretty good buddies. And after the first month, I went back into the warehouse, and Neil handed me a check for $5,000. He said, "That's your commissions for the month." And I went, "You're kidding." I'd never drawn a cent out of the business until this time.
Wow.
And the next month I got a check for $10,000. The next month I got another check for $10,000. And I started to look at this going, oh my God, I'm not doing any invoicing, I'm not doing any purchasing, I'm not doing any shipping, I'm not doing any administrative stuff. I'm just out here having a good time with all my buddies and looking after their, all the inventory out here, and I'm making all this money. And what it led me to deduce from that was that quite often your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. Right. And had I when I look back at how depressed I was having lost the business, and now here I was having the best time of all, making tons of money and building the brand, it was just like, the most incredible turnaround, and it was my greatest blessing. And then by a pure fluke, I ended up getting 100% of the company back a few years later. So I guess the lesson for people is, that there is always disasters that are going to happen. But if you give it some time and some proper thought, it's amazing how time will turn things around.
I hope everybody got something out of that story, because here you are, you founded the company, and through a glitch in the paperwork, you no longer own it. And you could have been bitter, you could have been furious, and instead you turned around and you did the one thing that was missing from your brand, from your company, and that is someone who drove the sales into the stores. And that's exactly what you needed at that time.
It was a fluke, because it was the passion to want people to just feel the comfort of these boots, and that was what was needed. And I was much better for the company out on the road than I ever would have been inside,
Exactly. Now, I have to apologize to you, by the way, and I know it's not your fault, but I have to tell you this story, and that is this. I'm a graphic designer by trade, right. And the first time I saw Uggs, my natural reaction was, well, I'm not getting any of those for my wife. and I kept seeing women all over the place wearing them. And my wife, you have to realize, she's from the Caribbean, and she was raised in French culture. So she buys the best quality of everything. So I resisted for years, Brian. I swear, please forgive me for this.
That's all right.
I didn't see the light. I didn't see the ways. I finally found a pair of Uggs that I just went, oh, those are awesome. And they were designed almost like an American native moccasin, a Native American moccasin with a 3/4 boot on there. And I got them for my wife, and on Christmas morning, here's this woman transformed, squealing like a child, and I thought to myself, now I see the light. Why did I resist for so long?
Isn't that funny? Yeah. The most common thing I've ever heard is, oh, my God. And that's the sound of someone putting sheepskin boots on for the first time.
And I don't know what it is about women, and any man listening who's married who knows this, every woman's feet are ice cold. I don't know what it is genetically, but that's the way it is. And when my wife puts on her Uggs, she's in heaven. And I'm just like, why didn't I think of this before? So every guy listening, go out and get a pair of Uggs for your wife this year, because it's astounding. I was amazed. So, what else do you want to talk about? I mean, I always love to hear the details behind the story, and I'm sure you cover a lot of this in your book, The Birth of a Brand.
Yeah, pretty much everything I'm talking about is in there, but it's really expanded in the book. There's tons more examples and stuff.
Now, a lot of people give up when they're being an entrepreneur. A lot of the things that you've just spoken about would make the average person quit. And what kept you going? Now, I know it's your meditation, your spirituality, and some of the passion behind what you're doing, but was there anything else we should know?
Yeah, there's... let me tell you another quick story to illustrate what really kept me going. Neil, who was one of the four, ended up buying the other two out, and then after a couple of years, he and I got on really well, and we were just about to get my stock back in the company, and he was in a motocross race and died, and I had to step in and help his widow try and figure out what was there. We'd bought new cars and taken out insurance policies on each other, and I was thinking that everything was going to, rosy inside the company, but being an accountant, I became a forensic accountant and had to go in and recreate the whole system there and try and figure out where we were at. And the long story is that it took 6 months of me, commuting to Anaheim, starting out, and every day, which was 4 or 5 hours on the road. Then I got the train every Monday and came back Friday. And I was like ill for 6 months because I was working. I knew the staff at the midnight shift at Bob's Big Boy because I'd always be there drinking coffee and working on schedules, And it was the most trying time of my life. But eventually I figured out that, the company had lost about $70,000, and it turned out that the life insurance policies we'd taken out on each other gave me the money to buy the business back from his widow. So she was made whole, and then I owned the company again, but I didn't have enough, financial capacity to buy more product for the coming season. And, my supplier had sort of done an end run on me, and he was starting to supply other people out there who were calling them, the boots by different names. And, long story short, I did get a savior who came in at the very last minute and bankrolled me for production. And even though we were late getting to market, I was able to survive purely because of the loyalty of all my customers who refused to buy all the knockoffs.
Wow.
And what kept me going through that period was, I had these four little statements that I typed them out from a book, and I put them in the front of my daily planner, and it has been transferred for 25 years into each New Year's daily planner. I've got this same little note thing. And here's what it says: feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, invigorate in the presence of difficulties, and enthuse over apparent defeat. And every time I would get really, really down, I would just sort of come across this, and I got to learn, if things were uncertain, like would I survive that year? That was what I was thinking the entire year. Will I survive? And that I came to love the uncertainty of it. It became like a game for me. Wow. And the disappointments, fatten upon disappointments, I can't think of one bad thing that's happened where I didn't look back later and go, God, I'm glad that happened, because look where I am now, And so if things would go wrong, instead of being too disappointed, I'd go, okay, well, that's bad. What can I do with that? And always I came out ahead. Invigorate in the presence of difficulties is standard, but enthuse over apparent defeats of beauty, because there is no thing as defeat unless you actually take the step to give up. I mean, you actually do give up, right? Because it's just apparent defeat. And life doesn't, and business doesn't sort of start at one point and rise in a direct line to the top of the chart. It's a series of cruising along flat, hit an obstacle, learn how to overcome the obstacle like it's a plateau, and you get up on the next level of the plateau and you cruise along flat, hit another obstacle, get over that one, cruise along the next plateau. So it's a series of plateaus, and as long as you keep finding a solution for the problem, you'll never be defeated. And that's a huge, huge lesson for everybody listening, that defeat is not a real thing until the time you give up.
Wow, that's intense, and I hope everybody's writing this down. Can you repeat those four again? Because this will help you overcome during those times when it feels very bleak.
Yeah, they're in my book too. It's feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, invigorate in the presence of difficulties, and enthuse over apparent defeat.
Wow.
I swear it'll change you. It'll change the way. What it does, it takes the victimization out of it. And, the poor me. Oh, why did this happen to me? And it puts you in control. Every one of those is a power statement. It puts you in control of your mind.
Wow. I would write those down in a Word document and print it out and put it on the wall. I think that is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Yeah. Let's shift gears. We only have a few more minutes left, and I really wanted to ask you, because you're telling these fantastic stories of being in the trenches in the beginning, selling this brand, getting it out there, discovering who your target audience actually is and how to communicate to that target audience. But as you're in hypergrowth, how do you choose a team? Like, I'm sure you remember that first employee that you hired.
Yeah, it was a guy called Tom. He sent me a resume out of the blue, and he was like a clone of me. And I knew I needed somebody else on the road because because I was an accountant, I knew the administrative start of it. And so he came in and took over all the trade shows and the sales and marketing and stuff. And that left me to figure out, how do I make this a nationwide brand? Because surfing's great, but nobody in Minneapolis has read a surfer magazine. So I had to figure out, I found what do all the kids do in Minneapolis and, back east, well, they play ice hockey. And I thought, oh, my God, that's great because the moms have to go into those freezing cold rinks and sit there for an hour. And so that became a huge breakthrough. And snowboarding and skiing was another niche, but
right.
We weren't mainstream, and it wasn't until I was flying back from New York one day, and I was sitting next to a girl who was reading People magazine and Us magazine, and all these stars were walking out on the streets, and it was describing what whose brand they were wearing. And I thought, how do I get into that? And so I researched and found that there's a group of people in Hollywood called stylists, and they are the makeup artists and the hair stylists and the wardrobe people. And so I sent a letter out to a mailing list of about 400. And 40 of them responded, so I sent them boots. And before long, the Uggs were showing up on sitcoms on TV, and then they're starting to see in the movies. But the best part was that they were being spotted on like Cameron Diaz or Pete, all these stars walking around the city in New York or Los Angeles, and it was saying Ugg boots, and that began the national craze of popularity. And because of that, there was a way we were able to get onto Oprah's best picks for Christmas, Oprah's favorite things, and we had 20 minutes of just national coverage on nothing but Uggs for 20 minutes. So these things, were serendipitous, and that's what really launched the brand into a mature business.
Well, I think anybody who's listening who's an entrepreneur, they always think that success is going to be when you shoot that magic arrow to the very top and you get the right person to buy your product, and that's not it. It's simple baby steps that you took to take that brand and get everybody at the bottom excited about it, and all of a sudden, like the buyer told you, we're an elephant. We don't buy anything until the mice are scurrying around us. Yeah. And I thought, you did just that. And don't worry about the big buyers. Don't worry about the big brands. Get them to come after you and call upon you. Yeah.
I've got another favorite quote. The quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole, and as long as you're just plodding away, living your life, trying to do the best thing you can with your business, every obstacle you find a solution. As long as you keep doing a little bit more day by day by day, one day you're going to look back and go, oh my God, I'm almost there.
Wow. And you eventually got big enough that you decided to sell Uggs to Deckers, which is a publicly traded company. How did you know that was the right fit for your baby, your Uggs brand?
Well, that's a great story. Remember I told you I was at Malibu selling boots out of the back of my van?
Yeah.
Well, a couple of spaces up was Doug Otto, who had a sandal business, and he had these triple-decker sandals. And he called his company Deckers, and we ran across each other year after year after year on the road, just because we were sales reps, and he eventually took his company public when he got the Teva brand, and the outdoor market took off, and he went public on that, and he had tons of cash lying around, and my business had got up to about $15 million, looking like with reorders was going to look for a $20 million season. And there were two things. Number one, I just didn't have the ability to raise the finance for the production because all of the conventional bankers and investment bankers are going, those things are a fad, Now, this is after 17 years, but they're still saying, they're a fad. They won't be around next year, right? And so I couldn't raise money from the traditional finances. And the other part of it is the company had got quite big, and I am an entrepreneur and I love startups. And now we had administration, and they were having committee meetings, and I just it was like pulling hair out for me to sit through these endless meetings on what color shall we do next year, and there's this horrible consensus to make a color that nobody likes, but it solves the problem, and so I happened to be in Atlanta going to a super show there, one of the biggest sporting goods retail shows, and way down the other end of the baggage claim was Doug Otto. And I knew he'd just gone public. I knew he had tons of cash in the bank. And I walked down there, and we saw each other and high-fived, and I said, Doug, if ever we're going to do this, now's the time. And his company died every winter, and my company died every summer. And so it was, we both knew it was a perfect fit. We'd even talked about it before then, but I just said, now's the time. And we had the accountants talking to each other that afternoon. So in a way, I went public, but I didn't have to go through the agony of it. I just totally cashed out, and it was perfect timing for me.
Yes, going public is quite a headache. The due diligence alone is about a 2-inch thick piece of paperwork that you have to fill out personally on your personal stuff and all this other stuff. So you really, I'm not saying you lucked out. I want everybody to understand this really was about relationships.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It is amazing. Everybody, please go out and get Brian Smith's book, The Birth of a Brand, Launching Your Entrepreneurial Passion and Soul. And, Brian, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
If my website is briansmithspeaker.com. That's Brian with an I, briansmithspeaker.com. And if you go there, you'll see videos. You'll see the ability to sign on and get a free chapter of the book to get a sampling of it. There's always, ways to sign up for I do a 2 or 3 minute, what I call Brian's boots on the ground tip for the week. And
I like that.
I've got 51 of them that I've pulled out of my book, and I've done a 2 or 3 minute video on every one of them. And so you can get one of those for free every week. So there's a lot of value on going to my site, and and otherwise the book's on Amazon. So just find it there.
Fantastic. Brian, one last thing. What would you want to tell some of our entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening in right now, that one thing that helped you get through it all?
Okay, it's belief in your product. If you really believe it, you'll figure out a way to overcome all the obstacles. And while you're doing that, you'll be getting better and better at understanding your product and your market. So just believe in what you're doing. And if you really don't believe it, find something else,
Thank you so much. Go out and get The Birth of a Brand. Brian Smith, founder of Uggs, and an amazing guest today. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time on Journey to Success.
Hey, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks a lot.
You bet. Thank you. And everybody, take care now, and we'll see you on the next episode of Journey to Success.